Hey, welcome to the channel. My name is Jason, and here I talk about all things story. And the story I am talking about today is actually a TV show. It is the miniseries called Station 11 that is on HBO Max. I know I'm branching out a little bit. If you know me, if you're new here, I mostly do book reviews. I mostly talk about storytelling, writing specifically, but I love film. I love narration in all of its forms, and so while I started the channel kind of doing a mixed thing, I focused more on books and writing, but I said, screw it. I'm going to talk about film and TV as well. But through the lens of a storyteller, through the lens of someone who tries to articulate why he, being me, may or may not like something. So these reviews may be a little bit different than you're used to from a normal TV or movie review standpoint. I may dive a little bit deeper into character. I'm going to structure these somewhat similarly to my book reviews, meaning talking about character, talking about plot, talking about narrative misfires. It's an experiment. It's a work in progress. So let us begin. Let us begin to talk about Station 11. So Station 11, it is a miniseries on HBO, a post-apocalyptic one based on the novel by the same name by Emily St. John Mandel. So this novel, actually, I tried to read it a long time ago when it came out. Heard a lot of great things about it. I couldn't quite get into it. It could have been the fact that it centers around an acting troupe, and I don't really care so much about theater or anything like that. And I know you may be saying, that is unfair. You should give it a shot. Maybe I will go back and read it, but maybe I won't, because from reviews I've read, the novel structure is very similar to the miniseries, and I had quite a few problems with it. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about this. So Station 11, what is it about? What is the hook? Well, it is the end of the world. There is a flu decimating everybody, killing everybody. We do not know the origin. We just know that it is moving very quickly and it is killing a lot of people. There are some people who are immune, who are our survivors, the characters we follow along this journey, of which there are multiple timelines. Speaking of timelines, I believe that fits into the hook here, because it is at its core how this show is constructed and what you can expect. So we have a timeline where it is the present. We're following a troupe of actors who are traveling around the apocalypse performing plays. And then the other timeline is the beginning of the end of the world, moving toward the present, moving toward this other timeline we are witnessing, because it does involve some of the same characters, which I will get to. And with all of this going around, there's a connective thread. That connective thread is a graphic novel called Station 11, which was written by one of the characters in this story. And in the middle of all this is a prophet doing what prophets do, trying to usher the world into a conclusion based on his own personal experiences or things that he's read, let's say, in a book. So let us begin with character, the glue that holds everything together. I think this story is best told through 4 specific characters. There are many, many characters in this that, like I said, there's a troupe of actors. There's other people in the same timeline that these people share. But these 4 are key to the narrative, so I'm just going to stick to them. So we have Kirsten. Kirsten, we are introduced to in the beginning. She's a very young girl. She's an aspiring actor in the theater, tied to this man that is kind of the connective tissue named Arthur, with all of these characters. But anyway, the play ends after a tragedy. Arthur dies. Some things are going awry. This flu is starting to infect everybody. And then we meet Jeevan, who is a man, a very cool character, who proceeds to try to save Arthur. And even though he's not a doctor whatsoever, which, you know, cool narrative stuff there. This, by the way, I think this might get into spoilery territory. So if you have not watched the show and you would like to just hear my final thoughts, the review aspect, check the time code below. Because, yeah, I don't think there's any way of really talking about this without getting into some spoiler territory. So Kirsten and Jeevan, probably our best duo in this entire thing, the connective thread that was the most interesting. We have Kirsten, as I said, lost. Jeevan is trying to take her home after this play, after all this stuff has gone on. They get home, the parents aren't home. He is forced to kind of take her under his wing. And they're a great contrast, because Kirsten is very mature for her age, and Jeevan is, as his sister affectionately calls him, the brother who eats cereal for dinner, I believe. So even though he's the adult in this situation, I feel like thematically the roles are reversed. He feels ultimate responsibility of taking care of this girl, but she kind of feels like she can take care of herself. But anyway, probably the best part of the entire show is the relationship and the progression of these 2 characters across their own timeline into the present. So that's Kirsten and Jeevan. Great dynamic. and one that you will enjoy revisiting because the show, the episodes, everything's divided into multiple timelines. You're jumping a lot, but this one you will enjoy immensely. I love the construction of it. The Prophet, yes, the Prophet, the antagonist of this entire thing. This is getting spoilery, guys. So again, skip to the end if you want to just hear about the score. He is the son of Arthur, who is the actor who died on stage. He goes through a traumatic experience at an airport. A man who he tries to save off this plane of infected people is shot in front of him, in his arms, in fact. And then they are kind of put away in quarantine. And this is presumably where the Prophet, his mind changes, right? He's emotionally affected by this thing, and he decides to leave. He runs away to grow up to become a bearded, long-haired prophet who we meet later on in the present day narrative. So the problem I had with Tyler is that he is a emotionless child in the beginning. Okay, so when he's young, when he experiences this traumatic event, he is essentially like a slack-faced dummy. And I'm mannequin. I shouldn't have said dummy, mannequin. But he's in these scenes, and he's always got his headphones on. He's always playing his little handheld game device. But the emotion, the event never really translates. It never is communicated to the viewer, to myself anyway, in such a way where his actions later in life make much sense. Because what his actions are later in life are he's amassing these followers, all of these children who are kind of suicide bombers. There's this other group of people who have put landmines around their establishment for protection. These kids dug them up, they strapped them to their chests, and they caused destruction. And so he's trying to essentially get to this place, this airport where he left his game device, to, I guess, erase humanity, erase all of the data, destroy it, so I guess we can start over again, maybe? But again, the reason why it doesn't work for me is because we never understand his motivation. I'd have a conversation and try to figure out like why he was doing the things he was doing. You should never do that in a show, in a narrative whatsoever. You need to understand the motivation. You need to feel it because you're consuming all of this. You don't have to think about it too much. I think discussion after the fact is what you want, not during, not trying to figure out why someone is doing something on screen, because that's a failing of the writer, the director. So Miranda, the final character I would like to talk about in the character section. I know this is getting pretty long. She's the one. She's the author, the illustrator of Station 11, which is this graphic novel that is essentially the connective thread through all of this thing. So there are only a few copies. Tyler, the Prophet, has one. Kirsten has another. And they just pour over this thing. Over the days, over the years, it is something very special to them. Tyler uses it as his Bible, essentially, right? He uses it to inform his sermons and I guess his philosophy on the world. Kirsten uses it as sort of a tie back to her dead mentor, Arthur, who was very special to her. And Miranda, being the creator of this graphic novel, has poured all of herself into it. And I think this is another failing. I love the character. I love her emotions, there's some great scenes where she confronts Arthur and his friends. But she keeps this graphic novel, the creation of this graphic novel, very, very private, because she just wants to create something for the sake of creating something, which I think is a beautiful sentiment, but it doesn't really, again, I should probably talk about this more in the plot. I know I'm kind of mixing things up here, but I think character and plot are intertwined, and so it's important. She creates this stuff in private. She's upset when someone goes in and observes it before it's finished. And that's kind of the impetus of her exiting the narrative to a degree, or at least severing the relationship with her and her husband, Arthur. But anyway, cool idea. I love the connective thread of this Bible, right? That is sort of affecting people in different ways, in fact, affecting the course of what is going to happen to all these characters, right? Because they're all connected. She's a great character, but I don't feel like the writing ever really convinced me of why she was doing what she was doing and how it sort of related to the overall narrative. So speaking of narrative, let's talk about the narrative or the plot. And again, I'm going to be talking about character, plot, all these things intertwined. I probably shouldn't have broke them up, but anyway, here we go. So we have Kirsten and Jeevan, who are locked up. They're holed up in this apartment with Jeevan's brother until they run out of food. They can't do it anymore, and they have to go out and escape. That is by far the most interesting plot line, as I've said, in this entire thing. And you're constantly wanting to revisit these characters, see where it's going to lead, see where this story is ultimately going to lead. I mean, you already know that Kirsten exists in the present, right? It's 20 years later, she's an adult, but you want to know, like, well, what happens to Jeevan? I think that's what I always wondered. Like, what happens to this guy? Because you don't see him again until the very, very end. So then you have also the past. We're learning the past before this past. So I guess there's 3 timelines. You see Arthur, Miranda, their interconnections with another gentleman, I can't remember his name, who plays a prominent role in the show, a bearded fellow who's kind of at odds with Arthur through his acting career. But we see these. We get back. We see Arthur. We see Miranda interacting. We see the creation of Station 11. We see all of these other peripheral characters going along this journey with them, having these conflicts. And then finally, the traveling troupe of these actors who Kirsten is a part of. And they travel around performing plays, specifically Shakespearean plays. This is probably the weakest part of the entire show because doesn't feel to be much of an arc. So we have this troupe of people. They're constantly invited to this certain location by this mysterious man. Eventually they get there, of course. It's the airport where we relink with all of the other characters, including Tyler, the prophet's mother, 20 years later. But that's pretty much the extent of it. I don't feel like there's really much emotional tissue there. There's not much conflict. We do have another young lady who is friends with Kirsten who kind of becomes wooed by the prophet. She wants to leave, which, you know, it does eventually culminate into that, but not terribly interesting. And I found myself not really enjoying those aspects of the show whatsoever, that timeline of the show. I always wanted to get back to Kirsten and Jeevan. Secondly, probably the Arthur tale with Miranda and, you know, the process by which she was writing Station 11. So speaking of Station 11, this graphic novel, it was doing something like Tales from the Black Freighter. If you've ever seen the film Watchmen, if you haven't, it is a graphic novel, a comic book that is sort of a parallel story to the narrative that is unfolding before your eyes in the Watchmen tale. Really cool device. It is exactly like that here, but the biggest problem I had was it never comes to fruition. We never get a real dense understanding of what is in this graphic novel and how it relates to the narrative we are seeing. And I think that's okay. I don't think I wanted to know every little step, like every talk bubble, every dialogue bubble, everything that happens to every character. But I needed to get enough out of it to understand how it related to this story I am watching now with Kirsten, with the prophet, with Miranda, with Arthur, all of that. And maybe I'm just dense, maybe I missed it, but it felt like a lot of loose ends. There's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of these storylines that are coming together to a point, and I think it's a great idea. I think if you're going to do that, though, if you're going to do that, you need to make it be a cathartic ending. It was not. That was my biggest beef with this entire thing, is that it just kind of ends. I'd say the most powerful moment in the show is when, and it's not that powerful, but like when Jeevan, so let me step back. So Jeevan and Kirsten are separated at one point in time when she's a young girl. And you're always wondering, like, whatever happened to Jeevan? You find out what happened to Jeevan. It's a strange little side plot where he becomes a doctor, right? I mean, and that does harken back, that does echo back to the opening shot when someone asks him if he's a doctor, when he's sitting over Arthur himself trying to do something to bring him back to life, and he's literally asked, well, you're not a doctor, or are you a doctor? So anyway, Jeevan becomes a doctor. Cool character arc. He's in this Walmart or something with a bunch where all these pregnant women have gathered to have their babies. There's another doctor there, and so he kind of is forced to become that doctor, and he eventually does. We see him as an older man, as the best doctor he can be through his experiences. At the airport, the final destination where Tyler wants to destroy everything, he wants to reset humanity, where the troupe is putting on the play of Hamlet, Jeevan and Kirsten are reunited. It was okay. I don't think it was as powerful as I hoped it would be. He turns around, he's in a crowd, turns around, sees her standing there, they recognize each other. But it's kind of this empty reunion, and I think that's the most unfortunate thing here, because that was the best part of the entire experience, the entire story for me. So yeah, I think that was a miss. And then also Tyler himself, the prophet, they put on Hamlet. He plays Hamlet, and he kind of works through his mommy issues, his abandonment issues, the trauma that he allegedly went through. We can only assume it was traumatic for him because we did not see it was traumatic for him. We did not see the turmoil inside of his head. And I think that's, again, another big failing of this, is that the motivation of the prophet, this kid, Tyler, it just never really communicated well. And so I think it's just, again, another emotionally empty part of the story, another failed character moment. So what happens? What happens at the end? Well, Tyler does, he comes what he seeks out to do. He destroys his game device where he downloaded all of Wikipedia apparently or something like that. He kind of absolves the issues with his mother. She actually goes off into the sunset with him and all of these cult children to start anew, I guess. I don't know. And then the troupe, the acting troupe, they move on. As they do, we have I'd say a really great moment at the very end, though, is when Jeevan and Kirsten are walking down this path, trailing the troupe of this caravan who is moving on to another location. There's a fork in the road. There's a split. The troupe is going down one road, and there's another empty road, presumably toward Jeevan's home, who, he came to the airport to help some people. They say their goodbyes, they walk their separate ways. There's a nice wide shot of them just slowly traveling down these two roads, and it's a great moment. I think it was a great bookend to the entire thing. But unfortunately, the character work between the two was so great in the beginning. It just didn't connect with me at the end, and it's really sad because I think that might have helped the whole thing turn around a little bit. And then the prophet, like I said, he goes off into the sunset with his cult, with his mother, to again reset humanity. I don't know. So with all of that said, I'm gonna give Station 11 a 6.5 out of 10. Some beautiful character moments. Jeevan, Kirsten, I love their story. It just didn't at the end really come together for me. Missed narrative opportunities. The prophet, we never really fully know his motivation. What he does really never connects. It really never hits home. And then Station 11, the book itself, the narrative within the narrative that is the connective thread, pulling all of these elements together. At least it should have, but it did not. It was a missed opportunity. We never really understood what Station 11 meant, what it was, how it related to the narrative. And it's unfortunate because I really like that idea. I really like the idea of an object that is sort of carried through time, affecting people in different ways. It just didn't culminate to anything whatsoever, at least in my opinion. And it's funny, the book I'm writing right now, comic books affect, they're special to the protagonist, so, which I wrote before I knew anything about this, so but again, this essentially is copying The Watchmen and The Black Freighter. So I'll just have to be conscious to make sure that I do it right, or at least I do it in such a way that doesn't feel empty. Should you watch it? Yeah, I think there's some things to be had here. I think the relationship between the two main characters, well, two of the main characters, Jeevan and Kirsten, is totally worth watching. The show isn't a complete failing. It's just empty, and really what bothers me most is the potential that was just never reached. So if you'd like to support the channel, give me a like if you like the video. Subscribe for story-related content. If you want to see some of my own work, because I am a writer, check out the description below. You can find all my books there. Also, I have a Worth 1,000 Words series where I write a 1,000-word short story on the spot inspired by a piece of artwork, talk about my thoughts, maybe what I learned, what I didn't learn. And that is all. That is all for me. So thanks again for hanging out with me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.